Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin. A certain intellectual vertigo gripped the world of mathematics in the opening decades of the 20th century. The serene confidence of the previous era, which viewed the discipline as a majestic, unassailable cathedral of truth, had been profoundly shaken. Foundational cracks appeared in the form of logical paradoxes, such as Bertrand Russell's devastatingly simple question about the set of all sets that fail to contain themselves. In response, the great German mathematician David Hilbert proposed a grand program to secure the entire edifice once and for all. He called for a complete, consistent, and decidable axiomatization of all mathematics, a final formal system that would banish paradox and guarantee certainty forever. It was into this charged atmosphere of crisis and ambition, a high-stakes intellectual battle for the soul of mathematics, that a young graduate student from Florida named John Barkley Rosser arrived at Princeton University in the early 1930s. Princeton was then the global epicenter of this foundational debate, a place where the very meaning of proof and truth was being reforged. Rosser entered a world grappling with Hilbert's formidable challenges, particularly the Entscheidungs problem, or the decision problem. This question asked for a definite procedure, an algorithm, that could determine in a finite number of steps whether any given mathematical statement was provable from a set of axioms. Before one could even attempt to find such a procedure or prove its impossibility, a more fundamental obstacle had to be surmounted. The very idea of an effective procedure or computation was purely intuitive. It lacked any formal, rigorous mathematical definition. This was an unacceptable state of affairs. The quest for ultimate rigor required a precise language to describe the very methods of that rigor. At Princeton, Rosser fell in with the circle of the logician Alonzo Church, who was developing a radical new system to capture the essence of computability. This system was the lambda calculus. Rosser, with his characteristic acuity and technical power, became one of Church's most vital collaborators. The lambda calculus proposed that the most fundamental component of any computation was the concept of a function, its definition or abstraction, and its use or application. Everything could be represented this way. Numbers were functions. Logical operators were functions. A program was a grand nested function. The system provided a stark, minimalist, yet surprisingly powerful syntax for expressing any conceivable algorithmic process. Rosser's role was instrumental in exploring the properties of this new universe, proving many of its early essential theorems and demonstrating its surprising scope. Within this new system, however, a critical question of internal integrity arose. A complex expression in lambda calculus can often be simplified or reduced in multiple ways. One could choose to evaluate one part of the expression before another. If the lambda calculus were to be a reliable model of computation, the final answer had to be independent of the particular sequence of steps chosen to reach it. A calculation yielding 7 through one path and 5 through another would render the entire system useless. The proof that this ambiguity was absent, that all paths of reduction for a given term eventually lead to the same irreducible result, if one exists, is a cornerstone of the field. This is the Church-Rosser theorem. Rosser's deep involvement in its formulation and proof provided the guarantee of consistency or confluence that legitimized the lambda calculus as a formal model of computation. This result echoes powerfully today. It is the theoretical bedrock that ensures the reliable behavior of modern functional programming languages like Haskell and Lisp, where the order of evaluation is managed by the system with the certainty that the outcome, remains invariant. While Rosser was helping to build one of the fundamental tools for defining computation, Kurt Gödel's work from Vienna sent shockwaves through the entire enterprise. In 1931, Gödel's incompleteness theorems demonstrated that Hilbert's program was in fact impossible. Gödel proved that any formal system powerful enough to express basic arithmetic would necessarily be incomplete. There would be true statements within the system that the system itself could never prove. His proof was an act of breathtaking genius, constructing a mathematical statement that, through a clever coding scheme, effectively asserted its own unprovability. Yet, for all its revolutionary impact, Gödel's original proof contained a subtle technical condition. It required the formal system under consideration to possess a property known as omega consistency. Simple consistency means that a system cannot prove both a statement and its negation. Omega consistency is a stronger requirement. It stipulates that if a system can prove a property holds for the number 0, and for 1, and for 2, and so on for every individual natural number, then the system is forbidden from also proving the general statement that there exists some number for which the property fails. While this seems like a reasonable condition for any sensible mathematical system, it represented a potential vulnerability. Logicians wondered if a system could exist that was simply consistent, yet omega inconsistent. If such a system were possible, it would constitute a loophole, a strange domain where Gödel's original argument might collapse. This is where John Barkley Rosser, still a graduate student, made his first immortal contribution to logic. He saw a way to strengthen Gödel's devastating conclusion, to remove the reliance on omega consistency and thereby make the theorem apply to a much broader class of formal systems. The method he devised is a testament to his technical ingenuity and is now known throughout logic as Rosser's trick. He constructed a new, more intricate self-referential sentence. Gödel's sentence essentially declared, "This statement has no proof." Rosser's sentence was a more complex and adversarial construction. It declared, "For any proof of this statement, there exists a proof of this statement's negation that is shorter." The diabolical cleverness of this formulation becomes clear upon inspection. Assume the system is simply consistent. If one could prove the Rosser sentence, the sentence itself would then guarantee the existence of a shorter, pre-existing proof of its own negation. A system that can prove both a statement and its negation is, by definition, inconsistent. This leads to a contradiction. Now, consider the alternative. Suppose one could prove the negation of the Rosser sentence. This proof would have a certain length, a certain code number in the system. The negation of Rosser's sentence asserts that there is a proof of the original sentence with a code number less than or equal to the code number of the proof of the negation. This again forces the system to prove a contradiction. The only way out is to accept that neither the Rosser sentence nor its negation can be proven within the system. With this single brilliant maneuver, Rosser sealed the argument. He demonstrated incompleteness using only the minimal assumption of simple consistency. He closed the loophole that omega consistency represented, generalizing and fortifying Gödel's result against any such criticism. This achievement, accomplished in his mid-20s, showcased a mind capable of navigating the most abstract and perilous frontiers of human thought. His work solidified the boundaries of formal reasoning, a contribution of the highest order. Having reached these profound depths in the abstract realm of logic, his intellectual journey would soon pivot, applying a similar spirit of rigorous, explicit construction to the seemingly more tangible, yet equally mysterious, world of the integers. The intellectual current that carried John Barkley Rosser from the vertiginous heights of metamathematics to the ancient landscape of the integers was a profound one. His journey represented a change in subject, a pivot from the architecture of proof itself to the properties of the numbers that form arithmetic's bedrock. The spirit of his inquiry, however, remained constant. It was a demand for absolute clarity, for explicit construction, and for results that were computationally sound and verifiable. The world of whole numbers, seemingly so much more solid than the ethereal realm of formal systems, held its own deep and perplexing mysteries. Foremost among them was the enigmatic, almost whimsical distribution of the prime numbers. For centuries, mathematicians had sought a pattern in the primes, a law governing their appearance along the number line. By the late 19th century, a monumental insight had been achieved, the prime number theorem. This theorem provides a powerful asymptotic description, stating that the density of primes around a large number x behaves like 1 divided by the natural logarithm of x. In more formal terms, the prime counting function pi of x, which gives the number of primes less than or equal to x, is asymptotically equivalent to x divided by its natural logarithm. This was a landmark achievement, a glimpse into the grand statistical order underlying the primes. Yet, its very nature as an asymptotic law created a formidable gap. It described the behavior as x approaches infinity, offering precious little certainty for any finite, specific value of x. A navigator might appreciate knowing the ultimate destination, but a map without mileage markers or error bars is of limited use for the actual voyage. For the working mathematician, the prime number theorem was a beautiful prophecy with an unwritten timeline. Any proof that depended on, for example, the existence of a prime within a specific numerical interval was left on uncertain ground, often forced to rely on unproven conjectures, chief among them the Riemann hypothesis. It was precisely this chasm between the asymptotic and the explicit that Rosser, in a celebrated collaboration with his student Lowell Schoenfeld, set out to bridge. Their work, published in a series of landmark papers beginning in the early 1960s, sought to transform the prime number theorem from an elegant statement of tendency into a suite of practical, ironclad tools. Their approach was a masterful blend of deep analytic theory and punishingly meticulous computation. They aimed to produce unconditional bounds for the prime counting function and its close relatives, the Chebyshev functions theta of x and psi of x. Unconditional meant that their results would stand entirely on their own, their validity independent of any unproven hypothesis. The fruits of their labor were sets of elegant, powerful inequalities. They established, for instance, that for all x greater than or equal to 59, x divided by the natural logarithm of x is a strict lower bound for pi of x. They then provided a corresponding upper bound, showing that for all x greater than or equal to 3,55991, pi of x is strictly less than x divided by the quantity log x minus 1.1. These inequalities, and dozens like them for other prime-related functions, were revolutionary. To establish them, Rosser and Schoenfeld first used early computers to verify their claims for millions of initial values. Then, with the computational foundation secure, they deployed the full power of complex analysis to prove the inequalities for all numbers beyond their computational limit. The result was a toolkit of unimpeachable certainty. A number theorist could now build a proof on a statement like the fourth prime p sub 4 is less than 4 times the quantity log of 4 plus log of 4, and cite Rosser and Schoenfeld as the authority. Their work became the gold standard for explicit estimates in number theory, providing the essential bedrock for the burgeoning field of computational number theory, and enabling countless proofs that required precise knowledge of the prime's finite behavior. This desire to pin down the properties of primes extended into another fundamental area of number theory, sieve theory. While the prime number theorem concerns primes in their totality, many of the deepest questions involve primes belonging to very specific sparse sets. The twin prime conjecture asks about primes P for which P plus 2 is also prime. The Goldbach conjecture posits that every even integer greater than 2 is the sum of two primes. These problems are inaccessible through the global estimates of the prime number theorem. The primary tools for investigating them are sieves, methods for estimating the size of sifted sets of integers. The archetypal sieve, devised by Eratosthenes in antiquity, is conceptually perfect. It removes all multiples of successive primes, leaving only the primes themselves. Its practical application for theoretical bounds, however, is cumbersome. The modern era of sieve theory began with the work of Viggo Brun, who developed a complex combinatorial method to obtain the first significant upper bounds for problems like the twin prime count. Brun's sieve, while groundbreaking, was intricate. It was here that Rosser made another decisive contribution. He developed what became known as Rosser's sieve, a conceptual and technical simplification and strengthening of Brun's ideas. The innovation lay in a more sophisticated handling of the core combinatorial principle of inclusion-exclusion. Rosser introduced a set of weights and a switching mechanism within the sieving process that allowed for a much more efficient and precise estimation. This refinement yielded sharper upper bounds for the number of primes in arithmetic progressions and other important sets. Rosser's sieve became a fundamental component of the analytic number theorist's arsenal. It was a powerful instrument in its own right, and perhaps more enduringly, it illuminated the path forward. His ideas on structuring the combinatorial argument and introducing weights were a crucial conceptual leap, forming the foundation upon which later, even more powerful methods would be built. The celebrated Rosser-Iwaniak sieve, a cornerstone of modern research, bears his name in recognition of this foundational contribution. In the world of primes, Rosser's impact was twofold. He took the most famous global result and rendered it into a set of practical, explicit instruments. He likewise refined the most effective local tools, sharpening the methods used to probe the most challenging structural questions about prime numbers. His mind, trained to identify and fortify the weakest assumptions in formal logic, had found a new and fertile field in the explicit, computational necessities of number theory. This unique talent for applying rigorous constructive mathematics to complex systems would soon be called upon for a task of immense practical urgency, driven by the crucible of global conflict. The global conflagration of the 1940s presented the scientific community with a series of stark, unforgiving engineering challenges. Abstract intellectual pursuits were supplanted by the immediate, life-or-death calculus of technological warfare. For a mind like John Barkley Rosser's, steeped in the ethereal certainties of symbolic logic and the elegant structures of prime numbers, this new reality demanded a profound reorientation. His talent for dissecting complex axiomatic systems and constructing rigorous, step-by-step proofs found an unexpectedly fertile, if terrifyingly practical, new domain, the science of making objects fly and land with predictable precision. The imperatives of national defense redirected his formidable intellectual energies toward the urgent problems of exterior ballistics. The core challenge was one of overwhelming complexity. A fired projectile, be it an artillery shell or a solid fuel rocket, follows a path governed by a host of interacting physical forces. Isaac Newton's laws provided the foundational language, a system of differential equations describing motion. Yet a simple parabolic arc, the kind familiar to students of introductory physics, represents a wild idealization. The reality for ordnance developers was a far more stubborn affair. The primary complicating factor is atmospheric drag, a force that changes dynamically with the projectile's velocity and the altitude-dependent density of the air. Added to this are the effects of crosswinds, the subtle drift induced by the projectile's spin, known as the Magnus effect, and for long-range trajectories, the almost imperceptible but crucial deflection caused by the Earth's rotation, the Coriolis force. For a rocket, the problem gains another layer of difficulty. Its mass is continuously decreasing as it burns propellant, altering its own inertia throughout the crucial initial phase of its flight. Solving the system of coupled nonlinear differential equations that modeled this flight was analytically impossible. The only path forward was numerical approximation. Before the war, this work was the province of the computer, a job title belonging to a human being, typically a woman, armed with a mechanical calculator and a set of prepared worksheets. An entire ballistics trajectory would be calculated step by step, with each small increment of time requiring a new round of laborious arithmetic. To produce a single firing table for a new piece of artillery, a document providing gunners with the correct elevation and azimuth for various ranges and conditions, could consume a team of human computers for weeks or even months. This computational bottleneck was a severe constraint on weapons development and deployment. A promising new rocket design was operationally useless without reliable data on where it would land. Into this environment of high-stakes arithmetic stepped Rosser, first at the Allegheny Ballistics Laboratory in Maryland, and later as head of the theoretical ballistics section at the Aberdeen Proving Ground. He brought the mind of a logician to bear on what was fundamentally a problem of applied physical mathematics. His unique contribution was a capacity for systematic organization and the imposition of rigorous structure onto a chaotic computational process. He understood that the challenge was twofold: formulating the mathematics correctly and then managing the immense flow of calculation required to generate a solution. He and his colleagues refined the numerical methods, employing techniques akin to the Runge-Kutta methods that allow for the stepwise approximation of a differential equations solution with a high degree of accuracy. They broke the monstrously complex problem down into a sequence of manageable, verifiable arithmetic operations. This process, in its demand for absolute precision and sequential logic, bore a faint but discernible echo of constructing a formal proof. Each line of calculation had to follow impeccably from the last, lest the entire trajectory diverge into useless fantasy. This systematization, while a vital improvement, still strained against the fundamental limits of mechanical calculation. The true revolution, and the chapter of Rosser's career that places him at the dawn of a new technological age, began with the advent of electronic computation. At the University of Pennsylvania, John Barkley and J. Presper Eckert were developing the electronic numerical integrator and computer, the ENIAC. This colossal machine, filling a room with its vacuum tubes, relays, and labyrinthian wiring, promised a computational speed thousands of times greater than any existing device. It was a machine conceived with the ballistics problem squarely in its sights. Rosser was among the first mathematicians to grasp the profound implications of this new technology. He saw in the ENIAC's electronic circuits the potential to collapse the weeks and months of human labor into mere hours or minutes. He became a pivotal figure in transitioning the work of the Aberdeen Proving Ground onto this new hardware. The task was monumental. Programming the ENIAC was a physically arduous process of manually setting thousands of switches and rerouting a thicket of cables to configure the machine's architecture for a specific problem. It was less like writing code and more like performing a complex form of electrical engineering. Rosser led one of the primary teams responsible for this work, translating the differential equations of ballistics into a sequence of operations the ENIAC could execute. The success of this endeavor was a watershed moment in the history of science and technology. In early 1946, the ENIAC performed its first full trajectory calculation, a problem that would have occupied a human computer for over 20 hours. The machine produced the result in 30 seconds. The demonstration was breathtaking. The computational bottleneck that had so constrained ordnance development was smashed. Firing tables could be generated with unprecedented speed and for a far wider range of atmospheric conditions, dramatically increasing the effectiveness of new weaponry. Rosser's role in this was central. He was the essential bridge between the abstract mathematics of flight and the physical architecture of the machine built to calculate it. He possessed the rare combination of theoretical depth to understand the equations and the pragmatic, logical clarity to map them onto this new and alien form of calculating engine. The experience transformed the field of ballistics into a truly computational science and provided one of the most powerful early demonstrations of the computer's capacity to solve complex, real-world problems. This crucible of wartime necessity had forged in Rosser a new perspective, one that fused the pure logic of his early career with the immense power of applied computational mathematics. The immense computational power unleashed at Aberdeen Proving Ground represented a permanent shift in the landscape of applied science. For Rosser, this experience crystallized a new intellectual mission. Returning to the academic world first at Cornell University, he carried with him the profound realization that the most abstract logical structures and the most powerful computational engines were becoming inextricably linked. His post-war career would be defined by an effort to institutionalize this synthesis, to educate a new generation in the rigorous practical application of formal systems, and to build the very infrastructure where this new kind of mathematics could flourish. At Cornell, he encountered a curious paradox within mathematical education. While the frontiers of mathematics were being pushed by increasingly sophisticated logical arguments, the teaching of logic itself often remained a province of philosophy departments, presented with an air of abstruse, almost metaphysical speculation. For the average mathematics student, the work of Gödel, Church, or even Whitehead and Russell felt distant, a foundational curiosity with little bearing on the daily work of solving differential equations or proving theorems in analysis. The language of formal logic was perceived as an alien tongue, its grammar complex, and its utility obscure. Rosser saw this disconnect as a fundamental weakness, a barrier preventing mathematicians from fully commanding the tools of their own trade. He recognized the urgent need for a pedagogical bridge. His definitive answer to this problem arrived in 1953 with the publication of his landmark textbook, Logic for Mathematicians. The title itself was a declaration of intent. This was a work designed for the practitioner. The book's brilliance lay in its deliberate and systematic demystification of the subject. Foregoing lengthy philosophical preamble, Rosser plunged his readers directly into the utility of symbolic logic as a language for expressing mathematical ideas with absolute precision. He painstakingly illustrated its principles, using examples drawn from algebra, number theory, and calculus, the native ground of his audience. He demonstrated how the quantifiers for all and there exists could be manipulated with the same confidence as algebraic variables, transforming the construction of a complex proof from an intuitive art into a rigorous, verifiable science. He effectively translated the formidable system of Principia Mathematica into a usable handbook, equipping mathematicians to build sounder, clearer, and more powerful arguments. The influence of this text was both immediate and enduring. It became a standard for graduate-level instruction across the country, fundamentally altering the relationship between mathematics and logic for generations of students. It helped cement the place of mathematical logic as an essential component of the mathematics curriculum, a core competency for any serious scholar in the field. Through this singular act of pedagogical synthesis, Rosser provided the mathematical community with a shared grammar, a formal lingua franca that enhanced the clarity and rigor of the entire discipline. His work ensured that the foundational insights of the 1930s would become the working tools of the 1950s and beyond. This commitment to strengthening the institutional and intellectual architecture of American science propelled him into the final grand phase of his career. In 1963, he accepted the directorship of the Army Mathematics Research Center, or AMRC, at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Established in the shadow of the Cold War, the AMRC embodied the new national consensus that advanced mathematical research was a strategic asset. The center's mission was to bring the full power of modern mathematics to bear on problems of national importance, a task for which Rosser's entire career seemed to have been a preparation. Here was a man who had plumbed the depths of undecidability, charted the vast emptiness between prime numbers, and harnessed the first electronic computers for military application. He possessed a unique panoramic view of the mathematical enterprise. Under his guidance, the AMRC became a premier global center for applied mathematics. He steered its focus toward areas of immense practical consequence: numerical analysis for complex simulations, statistics for understanding vast datasets, and the burgeoning field of computer science. He fostered an environment where theoretical inquiry was always tethered to tangible problems, creating a dynamic interplay between abstract structure and computational reality. His leadership of the AMRC was the ultimate expression of the philosophy that had animated his life's work, that the most elegant theories find their highest purpose when they illuminate and solve the most challenging problems of the world. He was, in a sense, building the very kind of institution he had once needed as a young ballistics consultant, a place where theoretical insight and computational power could converge with purpose and effect. John Barkley Rosser's intellectual journey charts a remarkable trajectory through the heart of 20th century science. He began in the ethereal realm of pure logic, grappling with the absolute limits of proof and computation alongside Gödel and Church. From these foundational questions, his path led to the concrete, computational challenges of number theory, where his ingenuity gave mathematicians new tools to explore the infinite terrain of the primes. The crucible of war then drew his formidable intellect into the intensely practical domain of ballistics, placing him at the vanguard of the computer revolution. Finally, his career culminated in a position of national scientific leadership, where he worked to build the very institutions that would carry this new computationally driven science into the future. His life demonstrates a powerful, evolving synthesis, a continuous movement between the abstract and the applied. He left behind specific theorems and crucial bounds, yet his most profound legacy may reside in the intellectual arc he modeled, a demonstration that the deepest foundational inquiries and the most pragmatic technological endeavors are two faces of the same human quest for understanding and mastery.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.